Hi geometry students. I'm going to give you a little quick guide on how to solve these right triangles that are quite difficult. And so I was working on some of it today, doing all the little similar triangles that we did on the notes on that one activity number 1 for these this standard, the 5th standard. So rather than drawing similar triangles, splitting up the smallest, the middle size or medium sized one, and then the largest one, it's going to be actually easier to use these theorems that you're seeing right here on this picture. So you know that this smaller triangle right here, and then the medium sized one, and then the largest one that it came from in the first place, they're all similar to each other, as you see right over there. Rather than splitting them up into like this picture and this picture and the biggest picture there, we can use these corollaries over here that are going to make it much more easy for us. And so let's see what we have here. We've got the first corollary that's talking about how they're looking at this picture over here, onto the right here, that you've really got side 1 and side 2. They're talking about how that is parts of that big hypotenuse. Do you see in the picture where it has the H drawn across the top? That's the hypotenuse of the largest triangle, the one that they started with. So they start with this one triangle, and then they go from its right angle and they draw in an altitude to its hypotenuse. So they go from the right angle to the hypotenuse, and that's the altitude. And you can see that it creates the other 2 triangles inside of the big triangle. So the altitude is labeled A there. H is talking about the hypotenuse of the largest triangle. And then that S sub 1 and S sub 2, those are parts of the hypotenuse. So that's the hypotenuse that got cut up. And then you'll see off to the side L sub 1 and L sub 2. Those are the legs of the original triangle. And so you can see from this first corollary that if you take the first part, or one of the parts of the big hypotenuse, and put it over the altitude, that's going to be equal to the altitude again over the other side of, the other part of the hypotenuse. So that's going to be one of the proportions you can use to solve for these unknowns in those triangles on worksheet G.SRT.5, worksheet number 1, I believe, was the one I was looking at. I'm going to give you some examples from that worksheet in a minute, but I want to go over these corollaries. The second one here is talking about if you take the hypotenuse of the big one, and put it over leg 1, it's equal to leg 1 over its side 1. So we're talking about this one right here. If we take the total hypotenuse over leg 1, that's going to be proportional to the leg 1 again over its side. So taking up those 2 parts of that one triangle that's on the left side. Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know what happened there. Okay, sometimes, I kid you not, this thing can be a real pain in the backside. Now I'm going to look at the last corollary here. It's talking about, again, taking the total hypotenuse, putting it over the other leg that you're seeing there. So the total hypotenuse over that leg there is going to equal that same leg again over its part of that hypotenuse. So the green one's there. So the total hypotenuse over leg 2 is equal to leg 2 over that side 2. And so these are the 3 corollaries. And what you should notice is that each time we do this, you can see me circling in pink there, that the means, remember the S1 and S2 in that first picture, those are the extremes, and then the other ones are called the means. Well, the means are always the same value. And so we've got the altitude and the altitude, so that when we do our cross multiplication, we're going to get a squared. And then over here, you've got the leg 1s are in the same position there when we multiply, so they get squared. And then over here, we've got leg 2. So every time you set up your proportions there, when you're solving those right triangles, you should always have numbers or variables in those positions that are the same. If not, you're probably not setting it up correctly. So let me give you an example from that worksheet that I was talking about here. Let me just keep on going. Here we are. What am I looking at? Problem 5. This is 5A on the back side, so page 2. And so this is the picture, and forgive my rudimentary drawing here, but This is what you had. You had x for the altitude, and then you've got those pieces of information there. And so if we go with our first one that we're talking about up there, and label these just like we did in the other one, there's the hypotenuse of the biggest triangle. And so there would be one of the parts of the hypotenuse, S1, and the other part of the hypotenuse is S2, and then we could call that one leg 1 and that one leg 2. And then go through and start setting up 3 proportions. So we would have 3 proportions to solve. And so the first one would be that side 1 over the altitude equals the altitude over the side 2. So we're talking about the parts of the hypotenuse. So that one. So setting it up, we would have this little S1 over the altitude, which is x, is equal to x. See how it has to be in the same position, is over y there, the other part of the hypotenuse. So that's one of them that we would set up. And we can go ahead and set up all 3 and then decide which one we should go after first. We can't solve this one yet because we don't know x and we don't know y, so we have to move on to our next one to set up. And so using that one, we could take the total hypotenuse, which is 9 plus y now, and put it over leg 1, which we'll call that 15 right there. So again, that has to equal 15 again, has to be in that same spot, over 9. Did I go too far? Okay, now, can we solve this one? Do we have enough information there? I do believe we do, and so I started and went, hey, we can do that one first because, you know, we're going to have 15 squared. 15 times 15 is going to equal 9 times 9 plus y. We're going to have that times that equals that times that. So we can actually solve that one first, and then once we know it, we can go over there, plug in what we just found for y, and then solve for that one. So we can solve that problem, that proportion, second. And then finally, we can do this last one, set up that third proportion there to solve. Again, it's the total hypotenuse, so it's 9 plus y, and you're going to already know y, so you're going to plug that one in at that point. Over the other, oh gosh, sorry, I'm tired. Over the other leg is equal to that leg that we're calling z over y, its other side. So once again, you're going to know y, you're going to plug that in. You're going to plug it in at the other part right there at the top, and then you're going to do your cross multiplying and you're going to solve this one. And so you can do that one third, and then you will have all your answers. Okay? And then I'll just do one more here set up. This is example B, and so we have this picture going on here. So let's see, what do we have? We've got 20 is the total hypotenuse there. So I'll just call that one the first part of the hypotenuse, and that its leg. And that one the second part of the hypotenuse that's split up, and that will be its leg. And then going along, and of course that's the altitude. And setting ours up again with those little corollaries that we know now. So if we take side 1 and put it over the altitude, which is z, it's going to equal z over side 2. So there's absolutely nothing we can solve there. We don't know x and we don't know y and we don't know z. So we'll just move along and we'll come back to that when we know parts of it that we can plug in. And so if we're moving along to the next corollary again, if I take the total hypotenuse and I put it over leg 1, that's going to equal leg 1 over its side 1 from that same triangle. Okay. Now, I can't solve this one yet because I don't know x and I don't know w. So hopefully in this third one, I can do this. And by the way, you see how I'm using 20 for the total hypotenuse? Yes, the hypotenuse is x plus y, but we know that the total is 20. So we're going to come back to that in a minute. And then finally, the third corollary there, we take the total hypotenuse again over the other leg is equal to that same leg over its part of the hypotenuse, its side. Now, aha, we finally have something that we can do. We can solve this one, so we'll solve that first. Once we know that, look at what this information tells us right here. We can now find out what x is by taking whatever y ends up being and subtracting it from the 20 because we're told that the total hypotenuse is 20. So we can do that second. Once we know x, look what we can do next. we can plug it in there and solve that one third. And then finally we can plug in what we have for x and for y up in the top and solve for it. And there you have it. So, you know, this might be easier for you. I think it is going to be a lot easier doing this and just knowing those three corollaries and writing them down on a little note card and then just using those. Going back to that first picture I showed you, so you can back this video up and go find that and write that down and put it on a note card, put it in your notes, do something with it. I just think rather than trying to split that big triangle up into the three that look the same way and trying to figure out, okay, what's the short leg, what's the long leg, what's the hypotenuse of them all, you'd have to do that every time. If you like doing that, that's fine, and that's your prerogative. You can keep doing it that way. But if you find this a little bit easier, then you can go ahead and do it this way. Okay, and just so you know, I'm not going to put one of these on the quiz that we're having tomorrow, so don't worry about these types of problems. These admittedly are more difficult than any of the other things we've worked with so far. And so basically your quiz is going to look a lot more like your first few worksheets where you're just determining, can I really say these figures are similar to each other? And if so, what criteria could I use? Remember, there's three for similarity. Is it angle, angle, or is it side, angle, side, or is it side, side, side? And then, you know, just go back through those first few standards worksheets, okay? I'll see you later. Thanks.